Gamers, gals, non-binary pals. If there's one thing I love more than playing Yu-Gi-Oh, it's being a hater about Yu-Gi-Oh. Now I want to talk about YCS Raleigh. I want to talk about, the decks that saw success, the decks that didn't see success, some of the cards that I thought were going to be super good, some of the cards that just turned out to be really bad, and just overall thoughts on the format as a whole. No PowerPoint, straight Twitter. Let's get right into the news. But first, this video was brought to you guys by Imperium Duelist. Imperium makes some of the best Yu-Gi-Oh accessories and apparel, full stop. In fact, I religiously used their cherubim oversleeves for over a year at one point. And speaking of accessories, we've come together to create the Hoppin' Around playmat. You're all my little drama frogs, and I wanted to create a piece of art that is actually some form of usable merch. It comes in two colors, monochrome and hot pink, which is my favorite color by the way, and I am in love with how they turned out, both the single and two-player variants. Pick up a playmat, be sure to use my code Stevie10 on all products for their site for a 10% off discount, and be sure to tag us when yours comes in. So you guys may have been aware that before Raleigh, there was a little bit of a ban list, and Snake Eye got a bunch of hits. They lost their Best Link 1 and Link Karibo, so they lost access to stuff like the Heat Soul line and being able to dodge hand traps. They lost Bearing the Fleur, they lost Savage, they lost Summon Limit, which was the actual best card in that deck. And we got a bunch of cards back. We saw Protos, we saw Tidal, Colossus, Kirin, and we lost Anti-Spell. This format looked to be maybe okay. It was Fire might still be good, but maybe other decks will be playable. Well, if you look at top 32 lists for Raleigh, this list might as well just say 55 to 60% Snake Eye, 40% everything else. So what happened? Turns out, if you look at the first place list by Cam Neal, turns out it wasn't Savage and Barone that was the problem. It turned out to be fucking Jet Synchron. If you manage to go uninterrupted and you can just game on your opponents, you can make Omega and Dissipator, where you go Omega, hand rip your opponent for 1, summon Dissipator, bring back the Omega, then hand rip your opponent again. It's very, very toxic, and it's very, very cringe, and it makes me want to shoot myself. And it's especially good versus stun decks, because Runic Stun saw a massive surgence, in large quotations, in the sense where it was probably the best anti-fire deck and had an amazing matchup with this Snake Eye Fire King, which, everyone thought was going to be the main cream of the crop. But it turns out that pure Snake Eye, none of the main deck shit got hit, because we still have we still have Oak, we still have Ash, still have Triple DOL Star, we still have Jet Synchron, we still have basically everything. And it turns out that because the Runic Stun doesn't play any hand traps, if you just win the dice roll, you're almost guaranteed to win the match. Because before, where Savage and Barone could quote unquote be responded to by a Mono Iwado or Dark Ornament or Sphere Mode or whatever, just hand looping your opponent is the most disgusting shit on planet Earth. You just hand loop a tip or maybe a board breaker and you just win. It's crazy. Additionally, when you look at the rest of the cards on this list, decks like Runic Blunder, shout out to Douglas, my former teammate, Labyrinth, Pearly, Snake Eye, Flu. Although these decks look very, very good, and although this format may look good on paper, and just oh my god, it's so diverse, so many other decks can compete. It's less that they're competing with each other, it's more that they're just trying to compete with Snake Eye. I'm not really sure is the healthiest way to go about it. What does Labyrinth do? Try and cheese your opponent with trap cards. What does Pearly do? It tries to spin away the Snake Eye cards without destroying them. What does Flu do? It activates D-Shifter. What does Runic Stun do? It activates a Floodgate. And all of these decks might as well just be the same flavor of we're trying to beat Snake Eye / Fire in just some capacity. When you look at Jack Zell's list from Raleigh, this list is so mediocre versus so many other decks. This is the most okay list of all time, but it's really, really good versus Snake Eye. And that's just what concessions have to be made in the current format. You have to prep for Snake Eye in such a massive capacity, and it really does just give me vibes of another tier 0 format, another tier 0.5 format where Fire is the only deck worth playing, and sure, maybe you could cheese out wins with other decks, but it's just not going to be worth it. Because why play Labyrinth when you could just play Runic Stun, which is objectively the maybe best deck at combating Fire King or Snake Eyes, and it just turns out it's not even that good anymore because people are just hand looping you for a million. Secondly, I also want to talk about this. Turns out that Protos and Colossus aren't actually that good. This comes with a giant asterisk. So the main thing about Protos and Colossus were at their heyday, these cards were way too accessible and belonged to decks that were way too good. Protoss was basically super duper searchable in Sword Soul, and it was basically just like, it took like a hop, skip, and a jump to make the world's most annoying ass floodgate. And the same went for Colossus, because Thunder Dragon was just super duper good. You could play this in like the Chaos Thunder package. It was just the most annoying floodgate of all fucking time. It's funny how these cards became so fucking mid. Yeah, it's like I said in my ban list prediction, or the little tier list that everyone fucking hated for some reason. It turns out that if your payoff isn't literally a fucking FTK or just infinite interruptions followed up by more interruptions and interactions on your opponent's turn, like in the case of Snake Eye being able to just play infinitely, or, you know, Brandon being able to set up a fucking gimmick puppet lock, it's just not good enough. Your deck is just unfortunately not good enough to compete in the current format. And although there were some decks that could theoretically make these cards like Tier Limit, compared to Fire or any of the other decks on this list, Tier Limit just gets caught in the crossfire. Like, Tier Limit's gonna lose a Runic Stun sometimes because of main deck Die-Fi. Tier Limit's gonna lose a Branded because of Gimmick Puppet. Tier's gonna lose to Flu and Cashera because Activate Shifter. A lot of new cards are also designed to bypass Troll. Oh my god, the fact that every fucking deck now just sets or activates from deck is so fucking crazy. Like, Low places from the deck, Diabellstar sets from the deck, like, what the fuck is this demented shit, bro? What year are we living in? Am I under psychosis? But what's also very curious about the format is that the format's kind of cheap in large quotations. Like, when you look at all the stuff that came out of Phantom Nightmare, like Voiceless Voice has gone down in price. Like, this deck is maybe able to be built for like $200 to $300. When you look at the price of Fire cards, Princess is now like a $15 card. Poplar is now like an $11 card. Cards like Wanted that were originally like $100 to $120 a copy are now a third of their price. So we're now gonna see even more representation, and now just anyone and their moms who has like a part-time job at fucking Starbucks is able to play a Fire deck, because $1,500 is way too much. But paying $700 now, that makes things a little bit more easy to digest. And this is like a really sad woo. Yeah, so the way how I feel about the current format is a little confused, because again, we have another 3 to 6 months of Fire decks being tier 0, and the only decks that are worth playing are decks that are able to have some sort of just FTK game plan versus Fire decks. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if other decks in the format should exist solely to beat Fire King. Like, yes, there are a lot of decks that you can play, but it's kind of just like, Mommy, what's the difference between Labyrinth and Cashera? They both set up floodgates. Nothing really changes, you know what I'm saying? But that's just like my quick rapid fire thoughts on the format. I don't really know how things are going to progress from a competitive standpoint. I think this format is potentially cooked in the sense where we just have 3 more months of the same format, except it's even more toxic now because every deck is just anti-fire, 100% solidified, and Fire decks are now just making fucking hand loops if they go fully uninterrupted. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Do you think Fire needs more hits? Do you think Fire is in a good place right now? Do you think the format's in a good place? And yeah, it's gonna be it for this video. Goodbye forever.